Welcome back to Race Day Live. Now, have you ever been fooled by randomness? I know I have many times during my punting career. We're going to talk about this in a bit more depth now with James and Hugh. I know Hugh's got some really good examples as well. Fooled by randomness, then. It's something that's I've heard mentioned one or two times. I mean,
good book. It's a good book, yeah. But as a general topic, what we're talking about here is the pitfalls into statistics and how they are applied to our favourite subject of horse racing.
The one's on screen there. McCoy's not had a winner all day. He must be due a winner. I'll back him in the
What this is about, it's a natural human instinct to find patterns in small streaks of events without looking at the overlying tendencies behind them. For instance, the graphic we had up there, that's an example of the gambler's fallacy. McCoy hasn't had a winner all day, therefore he must be due. In the long run of things, it doesn't really make any great impact unless you've got a strong reason, or you think he's fallen off, and in McCoy's, he's had a fall that's affecting him. In McCoy's case, that's not going to affect him anyway, based on previous evidence. But you need, the point we're making is you need to look at things in terms of long-term samples and not draw judgments from short-term, what we might call noise, rather than the overall signal.
And here is the caveat for television viewers of horse racing programmes. I'll say with tongue-in-cheek, but 99% of racing statistics used in racing broadcasts are either utterly worthless or worse, completely misleading, and put you on. And simply because they usually break every statistical law in the book, from small samples to selection bias to the way that they don't take things into account, like the impact value of a certain characteristic within a population. And generally speaking, they're usually used for support rather than illustration, illumination, as the old saying says. So you should be very wary of statistics that are force-fed to you. I once, in one racing paper I won't name, there was what's the headline on page 19 said, 1 for 1, Michael Bell and apprentice jockey, whoever it was, have gotten an unbeaten record, and it was dead straight.
That's why you should always be wary of any statistics that read something like 33% strike rate or 66% strike rate, because instantly you should be thinking, okay, that's either 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 6 or 4 out of 6 if it's 60.
So it's not enough of a sample size, is it?
Well, we'll talk
one out of one was obviously an example of that. But
we'll talk about the statistical parameters that you need to know before working out that a particular statistic is significant and, most importantly of all, predictive.
The second one there, Hugh, it said, I couldn't back a horse from such and such yard. They've had 25 losers in a row. Can't touch any of their horses at all. Not backing theirs.
Yeah, that kind of thing is meaningless without some kind of context to the data. For instance, if those 25 horses have all been 20 to 1, how many winners would you actually expect them to have had? Especially, well, if you take into account the long shot bias, probably none, or either none or one. And there may well have been, how many of the horses have finished second, beaten a short head? There's that aspect of randomness comes into horse racing. They're essentially chaotic events, and tiny things can affect the outcome of a horse race. And to make an overall judgment that a stable is out of form when they might have had a faller in the last that was 10 lengths clear, they might have had 10 20 to 1 shots, they might have had 5 runners up. You need to try and take a more balanced look at the overall picture.
And the point is, as well, is a binary measure of success, won or none, won or lost, can be improved upon. How in terms of trainer form?
Well, as I say, by looking at how they've run rather than win or loss.
And those figures are available to you in the Racing Post. There's a superscript number which tells you what percentage of a trainer's horses have run to form in the last fortnight. A much better measure.
It's
still flawed, but better.
Or how the horses have performed as related to market expectations. A very good way of finding horses that will run well at big prices, if you can find a small yard that's had a few horses run much better than its odds suggest, in not just once or twice, but maybe a number of times, that can be a good guide that the horses are really running well. If you believe, I know you question the whole concept of trainer form, don't you?
Even when it's significant, is it predictive? Is it not just what we call retrodictive? Does it just not measure the past? Does it actually say anything about the future? If you come across a horse today that comes from one of these in-form stables, is that a significant parameter to its success compared to, say, like how fast it can run, whether it's running over the right distance? I think all those things just absolutely obscure the tiny and often flawed judgment of whether it comes from a stable
I know
informed.
some people wouldn't back Union East on Saturday because they're saying, 4-year-old. When's the last time a 4-year-old won that race at Cheltenham? Because how many would have run in it was obviously another example.
Exactly.
But you're aware of that, though. That's the point. If you're aware of that, I was saying earlier that you can still write things for illustrative purposes, but next time you come across that, you can go, it's interesting to know that a 4-year-old's never won this race. I'll have a look and see how many have run. None.
How many were trained by Paul Nichols? How many were ridden by Ruby Walsh? How many attracted significant support in the anti-poster market? This is all the extra information you need to make up your decision.
And hopefully that's the point of our programme, that to educate yourself thoroughly, you need to look beyond the superficiality of things and blandishments that appear in the media, just to do ourselves out of a job.
Other points that I've got here as well, the tipster sent me 3 tips, they've all won.
Who was that, by the way? Just not that I'm interested, but
this is really topical because nobody will believe this. I actually made this stuff up about 3 days ago, and then 2 days ago I started getting all these tweets from people saying, "Have you started a text tipping service, Hugh?" I have no idea what they're on about, and lots and lots of different people appear to have had texts from.
A few of our emails have actually asked what happened to the horse that you texted him yesterday.
Okay, I did not text anybody a horse.
It's shocking. This.
I promise you,
shouldn't laugh. It's not funny. It's actually shocking.
What that they're doing?
Scamming you.
No, I agree, but it's just the timing of it in terms of what we're doing here. But I got all sorts of texts from people saying they'd had a text from Hugh Taylor, and of course you can guess what happened. There were 3 different horses being given in a 7-runner race, at least 3. There may have been more, but certainly 3 of the front 4 in the market. They all happened to attract support the night before, the market's night before being very, very weak. And all I said to people, I can guarantee you, if they've sent you the text of the horse that's won, if you were one of the lucky recipients of the horse that ended up winning, because it was one of the 3 that win, you will be receiving more texts. And it's like on the who's the illusionist who did
TV
the
program,
program?
wasn't it?
Darren Brown.
They went to Sandown, didn't they? They backed the horse, and there was the one girl, wasn't there? She had all the win. I don't know how it worked, but she ended up. She had the loss.
She was completely taken in, because it's the oldest trick in the book, because it defies our senses of logic that it couldn't be anything other than this amazing run of tipping.
One horse Saturday letter.
One horse Saturday, yeah, exactly. And this is how so many road tipsters operate, and you really should be aware of this. And my advice: any unsolicited tips you get, just completely ignore them if you can, because you don't know what they're sending to other. It's serious point, and I apologise if I sounded flippant to those who receive them, because it was, I don't mean to sound that, but really do not take things like that with any seriousness.
Just very quickly, the seconditis one. We had a tweet actually from Greg saying, "I've got beaten in 9 photo finishes in a row." He said that I don't even bother to wait for the result anymore. And you made a point. I've got seconditis at the moment.
Now you have to feel. He's going to hate what I'm going to say now, because it is going to be of absolutely no consolation. But when you have a run of seconditis, it is unfortunately usually just an effect of randomness, unless there is something. Maybe you're backing.
The gods aren't against you.
Really short. No,
it's cursed. That's what it is.
But nobody ever says, this year I've had seconditis. It's always a fairly recent phenomenon. And nobody ever says, I've had firstitis. I don't seem to be getting any runners up. The seconditis is something that, again, it's kind of like the availability bias. You really notice it because it kills you when it happens. I've had 2 months in the last 2 years where I've had chronic runs of seconds as opposed to the number of winners, and it's I absolutely feel for the guy, especially if it's in photo finishes, because you're tearing your hair out. But over the long term, most punters, there will not be a noticeable differential between the amount of winners they have and the amount of runners up, unfortunately. It seems like it when you get in it, and it seems like it'll never end and that the fates are against you, but it is just another factor of randomness.
Let's talk about the record for the year. I know you've got a couple of graphs for us, haven't you, Hugh, as well? So we're going to have a look at those as well on the screen.
Hugh's going
to explain. Hugh, just explain.
This is a punter's record. This is a punter who's having a really bad time of it. You can see that it's all been downhill for this punter.
That's the profit. Just go for the numbers on the left. The
numbers on the left is a profit, and you can see it's just going downhill, downhill, downhill.
He's just a loser.
This is one punter who's seriously struggling. Now, I don't know if we can have a look at a second graph.
So that's just a small sample. Now, here's the second graph.
Wait a minute.
You're really having this up, James, aren't you? This is a punter whose season appears to be going quite well. And I'm sure the more astute viewers...
Where's the point of it? Was that what we were looking at earlier?
Yeah, the more astute punters, the more astute viewers will have perhaps guessed at the point I'm making about this. This is actually my record for this year.
That was what we were looking at, wasn't it?
And the previous graph we looked at was the bit between the spike just before the blue bit and down to where Tony's just pointed out with the famous telestrator. And again, I'm just using it to make the point that a small sample size needs to be taken in a context of longer term data.
So how many selections were in that downturn then, Hugh?
Probably, from the bit where we showed, probably about, I'm guessing about 60.
60?
But there were hardly any winners in it.
Was it June, July?
Yeah, it was around June, July. I had a terrible run. I
remember you on the form that you were coming in and you had lots of emails, people saying what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, people were saying, "Where's it all gone wrong?" You know, and I was having an absolutely shocking run. And there's no two ways about it. But the reason I've highlighted this is because people often say to me, "How do you handle losing runs?" And like anybody else, you know, it does get to you when you're having a losing run. But the only advice I can give to people when they are having a losing run is try and look at the long-term data of your own selections and see whether this is something that might be expected. Because I know from my own bitter experience of previous years that every year I am going to have long losing runs.
Let's talk about that, because I know we've got some more interesting graphics about this, about predicted losing runs of a punter with a 10% strike rate who backs 10 to 1 shots. Hugh, you can explain more.
Well, I've shown this once before, but I think it's worth showing again. And bear in mind that this refers to a punter who would actually be a long-term winner because he's got a 10% strike rate backing 10 to 1 shots. That would mean he's going to win long-term. I did a series of 10 simulations. Each simulation was carried out by computer, a random computer simulation of horses with a 10% strike rate. And this showed the longest losing runs, the 5 longest losing runs in each 500 selection simulation. So it's kind of like almost picking 2 a day, not quite 2 a day. And in the course of a 500 run simulation carrying backing 10 to 1 shots with a 10% strike rate, you would expect a longest losing run, well, the shortest of them was 32. So if you're backing 10 to 1 shots each day, you can be a winning punter, and still you would be expecting during the course of a 500 series selection to be having a losing run of over 30.
So these, Hugh, are clusters of losing selections within samples of 500. So
and the reason this is so hard for punters to understand is that the natural instinct for us, if we're backing horses at 10 to 1, if we've got a 10% strike rate, is to think that we should have a winner and 9 losers, then a winner, then 9 losers, then a winner, then 9 losers. Right. And that's not the way it works out in real life. The randomness takes over. Even if your long-term strike rate is 10%, the winners won't work out like that. It's like when you toss a coin, you won't get heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails. You'll get little clusters. And as a way of understanding and dealing with losing runs, we need to develop an understanding of why losing runs happen and why they aren't necessarily a long-term symptom. I hope I've tried to explain that.
It's tremendous stuff, this is, isn't it? Don't you think?
This is good.
It's tremendous. So that punter we're talking about there shows a return on investment of 109%. And let's say he gave 2 10 to 1 shots to a friend of his. What those numbers are telling you is that you could go 15 to 20 weeks without a winner, and still being a winning punter with good judgment. And that tells me one important lesson that this programme is themed around is that I believe the differences in skill between punters are far less than the differences in psychology. I think what determines winners and losers out there is how people handle the realities of betting, of speculation. Because which one of us could handle 38 consecutive losers whilst retaining ironclad faith that we were a winner?
It would be so damaging, would it be soul destroying, wouldn't it, to have 38 straight losers and still have that?
I'd have run longer than that this year.
Was it 50 or something?
Yeah, it was around 50. It's the first time I've had to run that long.
You still had the faith. You didn't.
Yes.
Yeah. And psychologists have tried to measure the impact of winning and losing. And the nearest estimate they've come up with is that 3 winners is needed to offset the psychological impact of 1 loser. So in the course of our betting, we're facing a barrage of negative feelings about ourselves, of an inner voice saying, stop this, you're no good at it, give up, it's wrong to bet on horses and do all your family's weekly spending money in. And at the same time, we can really be winners. It's just that the numbers, we are fooled by randomness. The numbers, the sample size required to differentiate between good tipsters and good punters and bad tipsters and bad punters is enormous. Particularly that.
The temptation is, we had actually an email, I was talking to you earlier about it as well. Someone's emailed in and said, my temptation is if I have a few losers, small stakes, I want to smash my way out of trouble. I want to go and get the money back in one hit, find a good favourite,
and that's a perfectly normal human reaction.
So, yeah, that's the natural reaction, isn't it? You want to get back on the.
I'm going to have it all on the favourite in the first evens tomorrow to get it all back in one hit.
It comes back to the overarching truth that most punters are simply not prepared to go through the agony required to win. Because you have to suppress all those things. You have to be aware of the cognitive biases that we're speaking about. You've got to want to win so much that you're prepared to do things which most people find absolutely impossible to sustain without giving up.
Tony, people often, one of the emails that I sometimes get from people is, can you recommend a good book on betting to improve my... And the answer I always want to give, and it's not an answer that would particularly go down very well, but to improve your betting, I think that reading one of the many very good books on randomness, there's a really good one called The Drunkard's Walk, there's a book called Fooled by Randomness, is that Black Swan, is that not
that's
one about...
I'm not reading Taleb.
Yeah,
if you look at Taleb, Taleb, anything by him is sensationally good.
The Drunkard's Walk is a very good book, and they will help give you an understanding of the way that our minds underestimate the effects of randomness. And I know it might sound, people were saying, what on earth has this got to do with horse racing?
It's got everything to do with it.
It's to do with our reasoning and our understanding of probabilities and why things occur in sometimes a random way that they do.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there for now, guys, but we'll come back to that again during the course of the day. We've got a race at Lingfield coming up